In June 2025, a new band appeared on Spotify. They had 4 members, 3 albums, a verified artist badge, and within weeks, more than 1 million people were listening to them every month. There was just one small problem. The band did not exist. No tour dates, no interviews, no old photos, no awkward podcast appearances where the drummer explains his creative process. Nothing. Because there was no drummer. There was no singer. There was no band. The Velvet Sundown was generated entirely by artificial intelligence, and Spotify's own algorithm had been recommending them to real people. Not as a joke, not as an experiment, as music. That was the moment the music industry realized something had changed. Not in 10 years. Not in some distant AI future where robots write love songs and somehow still rhyme heart with a part. Because Spotify had finally done the thing investors had been waiting 15 years for. It had become profitable. The company that changed music had finally worked out how to make money from it. But almost immediately, a new problem appeared. A fake band. Millions of fake tracks, angry real artists, and a much bigger question hiding underneath all of it. What happens to Spotify if music no longer needs musicians? For 15 years, people asked the same question about Spotify. How does a company with hundreds of millions of users still lose money? It sounds impossible. Spotify was everywhere. On phones, in cars, in offices, in gyms, in shops that play the same acoustic cover of a pop song until every staff member quietly loses the will to live. By the early 2020s, Spotify was not just a music app. It was the default way millions of people listen to music. And yet, year after year, it still struggled to turn that popularity into profit. The reason was simple. Spotify was following the Silicon Valley playbook. Grow first, make money later. The idea was to become so big, so useful, and so deeply built into people's daily lives that leaving became annoying. And to be fair, it worked. Spotify became the biggest music streaming service in the world. Bigger than Apple Music, bigger than Amazon Music, bigger than YouTube Music. It had hundreds of millions of users, hundreds of millions of people paying every month, and a place in modern life so normal that asking someone, "What do you use for music?" almost sounds like asking what shape their phone is. But there was still one problem. It had never made a full-year operating profit, not once, in 15 years, which is generally considered a useful feature of a business. Then, finally, it happened. In 2024, Spotify posted its first full year of operating profit. Then in 2025, it did it again. Bigger users, more subscribers, better margins, more profit. For the first time, the story changed. Spotify was no longer just a growth machine. It was a real business. The CEO told investors the company was healthy. And for the first time in Spotify's history, that did not sound completely optimistic. Because Spotify did not suddenly discover a magic new business model. It found 3 levers and pulled all of them at once. The first lever was price. For years, Spotify's main premium plan stayed around the same price. Then, Apple raised prices. Amazon raised prices. YouTube raised prices. And Spotify looked around and thought, well, if everyone else is doing it. So Spotify finally raised prices too. And here is the important part. People did not leave. They complained, obviously. That is part of the subscription economy. But they kept paying. Because once Spotify is where all your playlists live, canceling it feels less like saving money and more like moving house. Technically possible. Emotionally annoying. The second lever was podcasts and audiobooks. Spotify had a huge problem with music. Every time someone listens to a song, Spotify has to pay royalties. A lot of royalties. So the company started looking for things people could listen to that did not send most of the money straight out the door. Podcasts were perfect. Spotify spent heavily buying podcast companies and signing huge exclusive deals. Joe Rogan, the Obamas, Kim Kardashian. A normal shopping list if your weekly shop costs $1 billion. The logic was simple. Music is expensive. Podcasts can be cheaper. If Spotify could get people listening to more podcasts, audiobooks, and spoken content, it could keep more of the money. The third lever was cost-cutting. In late 2023, Spotify laid off a large part of its workforce. Thousands of people lost their jobs. It was harsh. It was painful. And from a business perspective, it worked. Costs fell. Margins improved. The numbers finally started to make sense. So the clean version of the story is this. Spotify raised prices. Spotify pushed into podcasts and audiobooks. Spotify cut costs. And after 15 years, Spotify finally became profitable. That is the investor presentation version. Very neat, very tidy, probably comes with a blue graph pointing upward. But underneath that clean story is a much messier one. Because Spotify's profit has a ceiling. And that ceiling is controlled by 3 companies. In the 12 months before September 2025, Spotify removed more than 75 million tracks from its platform. 75 million. That is not a cleanup. That is not a spring tidy. That is Spotify taking a flamethrower to a warehouse. For context, Spotify's active catalog is often described as being around 100 million songs. So removing 75 million tracks in a year is like walking into a library and saying, "We've had to remove 3/4 of the books." Then quietly adding, "Also, some of them were written by a toaster." The reason was artificial intelligence. Tools like Suno and Udio can now generate complete songs from a text prompt. Vocals, instruments, production, everything. No studio, no musicians, no label. Just a laptop and a prompt like, "Make me a sad country song about a man who loses his dog, his truck, and possibly his tax file number." And the tool makes it. In seconds. That alone is not the problem. The problem is what people realize they could do with it. Spotify pays royalties based on streams. For years, a track only needed to be played for about 30 seconds before it could count. So if you could generate thousands of songs for almost nothing, upload them under fake artist names, and use bots to stream them, you could pull money out of Spotify's royalty system. Real subscribers pay money into Spotify. Spotify puts that money into a royalty pool. Then fake tracks and fake streams take a slice. That is the scam. And at scale, it becomes a machine. AI music goes in. Fake streams go around. Royalties come out. No fans required. No concerts. No merch table. No bass player asking if he can be paid in exposure. Just automated music farms quietly draining the system. Spotify admitted this was a problem. It said bad actors were trying to divert royalties away from real artists. And the scale is hard to understand. Rival streaming platform Deezer reported receiving tens of thousands of fully AI-generated tracks every day. That is not a trickle. That is not even a wave. That is the ocean kicking the door in. And in the middle of all of this came the Velvet Sundown, a fake AI band, with fake members, real listeners, and Spotify's algorithm helping push them to more people. That is what made the story so uncomfortable. This was not just some spam track buried at the bottom of the platform. This was the algorithm doing what algorithms do, finding something that seemed to work, and feeding it to more people. The machine did not ask, "Is this art?" It asked, "Do people keep listening?" And that is a very different question. To understand why artists are so angry, you need to understand how Spotify payments work. Spotify does not simply pay every artist a fixed amount per stream. It is not like, one listen equals half a cent. Thank you for your service. Instead, the money goes into a big pool. Then Spotify divides that pool based on share of total listening. So if an artist gets a tiny percentage of all streams, they get a tiny percentage of the money. That is called the pro rata model. But the simple version is this. There is one bucket of money. Everyone fights over the bucket, which, coincidentally, is also the business model for most of the internet. Now add AI. Every AI-generated track that gets streamed takes a tiny slice from the same bucket. Every fake stream takes a slice. Every content farm takes a slice. And that slice does not come from nowhere. It comes from real artists, especially smaller artists. The ones who are not signed to major labels. The ones who do not have giant marketing budgets. The ones trying to make enough money from music to keep going. Spotify payouts per stream are already very small. For many artists, it can take hundreds of thousands of streams to make what most people would consider a modest monthly income. So when AI spam starts thinning the pool, it is not just a technical problem. It is rent. It is groceries. It is whether someone can keep making music professionally. This is why Spotify introduced a new rule. A song now needs at least 1,000 streams before it can earn royalties. The official explanation was that this helps serious artists. And maybe it does. But it also cuts off the bottom layer of the spam economy. Because if someone uploads 50,000 fake AI tracks, and each one only gets a few hundred bot streams, those tracks no longer earn anything. The scam gets harder. Not impossible, just harder. Which is basically how every internet platform describes success now. But while Spotify was fighting fake music, a different problem exploded. Real artists started leaving. Not because of one AI song. Not because of one policy. But because many of them already felt the relationship with Spotify was broken. To be fair, Spotify is not ignoring the problem. In 2025, it announced one of the biggest policy changes in the company's history. There were three main parts. First, a music spam filter. This is designed to detect bulk uploads, duplicate tracks, fake metadata, and other patterns that look like AI content farms. Basically, if someone uploads 10,000 songs called things like Peaceful Piano Sleep Study Focus Rain Ambience Volume 47, Spotify's system might now raise an eyebrow. Digitally. Second, Spotify banned unauthorized AI voice clones. If someone uses AI to make a song that clearly sounds like a real artist without permission, Spotify can remove it. That matters because voice cloning is one of the scariest parts of AI music. A fake Drake song is not just a fake song, it is a fake identity. Third, Spotify started pushing for AI disclosure. Distributors now have to identify when music was made with AI assistance. That does not mean AI music is banned. Spotify is not saying every AI tool is bad. A human using AI to help make music is different from a bot farm uploading fake tracks to steal royalties. One is a creative tool. The other is a digital cockroach infestation. Spotify is trying to separate the two. And some of the results are real. Millions of suspicious tracks removed. New rules on AI voices. Better detection. More pressure on distributors. The worst scams are harder to run than before. But here is the problem. Spotify is playing defense against technology that gets cheaper and better every few months. AI music tools improve. Spam farms adapt. Fraudsters change tactics. Bots get more realistic. Every wall Spotify builds, someone starts looking for a ladder, and the flood keeps rising. This is why the AI spam problem is serious. But it is not the biggest threat. Because the biggest threat is not fake music. It is good AI music. Spotify's short-term AI problem is spam. Fake tracks, fake artists, fake streams. Fake bands with names that sound like they were generated by asking ChatGPT for indie band that sells candles. But the long-term problem is much bigger. What happens when AI-generated music is not bad? What happens when it is not spam? What happens when people actually like it? Not because they are being tricked, not because bots are involved, but because someone opens Spotify and asks for exactly what they want. Give me a song that sounds like driving home in the rain after a breakup. Or, give me background music for studying that feels like a movie scene but does not make me cry into my laptop. And AI generates it instantly. Perfectly personalized. Endless. New every time. That is where this gets uncomfortable. Because Spotify is already moving in that direction. Its AI DJ creates personalized listening experiences. It has experimented with prompted playlists. It is building tools that do not just play music, but shape the entire listening experience around the user. Today, those tools still rely on existing songs. But the logical endpoint is obvious. A platform where some music is generated on demand. No label, no catalog, no royalty negotiation. No 70 cents of every music dollar leaving the company. From Spotify's point of view, that could be the dream. The thing it has wanted for 15 years, music without the music industry. But from the artist's point of view, it could be a nightmare. A world where music is not something made by people and shared with listeners. It becomes a personalized audio product generated by software. That sounds dramatic, but every major media industry is already asking the same question. Writers are asking it, artists are asking it, actors are asking it. Now musicians are asking it too. What happens when the machine can make something that feels human enough? Not perfect, not genius, just good enough. Because good enough is extremely powerful. Most people do not need every song to be a masterpiece. Sometimes they just need something to play while making dinner, or driving, or pretending to answer emails. If AI can fill those moments, Spotify's relationship with music changes completely. It no longer just distributes music, it can help create it. And that is the part nobody has fully worked out yet. Spotify says it wants to protect real artists. And maybe it does. But Spotify also has a financial incentive to reduce its dependence on the labels. Those two goals may not always point in the same direction. That is the tension. Spotify built the biggest music platform in the world. So this is where Spotify stands. After 15 years, it finally became profitable. It raised prices, cut costs, expanded into podcasts and audiobooks, and proved to investors that the business could actually work. That should have been the happy ending. But instead, it arrived at the exact moment AI started changing music itself. A fake AI band gained real listeners. Millions of suspicious tracks were removed. Artists accused the platform of draining their income. Some pulled their music completely. And Spotify began building AI tools that could one day reshape what the platform even is. That is the strange position Spotify is in. It finally won the old game, just as a new one began. Because Spotify's biggest question is no longer, can streaming make money? It can. The bigger question is, what happens when the music industry's most powerful platform no longer needs the music industry in the same way? Spotify spent 15 years trying to become profitable. Now it faces a harder challenge, staying trusted in a world where music can be copied, cloned, generated, and uploaded faster than any human can keep up. The business is healthy, the platform is stronger than ever. But the thing underneath it is changing. And when the thing you built starts building something new on top of itself, nobody really knows who controls it next. Every empire has a story. Subscribe to hear the next one.